Okay, so welcome to our delayed trees in storm. And if you've got the kind of weather I've got, it's very appropriate because there's an absolutely howling gale outside at the moment.
Same here.
Yeah.
A bit windy here too.
Yeah, so we're going to channel that that quality into our painting, our work today. And it's interesting when we look, for those of you who did the 9 training sketches, but even for those of you who've only just started in this one and we've had the sunrise and the sunset, let's just go back to that we've got that theme of the trees, you know, where things are in pairs. And if we think about the trees, we did the trees in sunny air, which we're going to look at Padlet in a second. And now we're going to go to the trees in storm. What might you say are the forces at work, the hidden forces of nature in this pair of paintings that is at work here? What are we trying to express?
Hi everybody, it's Diane here. I was very taken doing the trees in sunny air. I guess I took it too literally, but what I was trying to do was show how the trees were living within the environment of the sunny air, not just, you know, background trees. I think Fiona mentioned that when we started to, you know, to think about integrating, but it just sort of struck me quite strongly how integrated everything is. Trees don't live without the air, and you know, to the electrons that are, I guess, in the atmosphere when there's a storm, and how they play together. You know, it's this interdependency that happens between, you know, the trees and the atmosphere that they live in. So it struck me with the first one. I guess it will be in the second as well. So that was my sense. Yeah.
So we've you know, obviously the tree. I mean, the trees, as I said, I think last time, are like the lungs of the earth. They are part of that intermediary zone between heaven and earth. So when we've in the sunrises and the sunsets, we've looked at this quality of breathing out and breathing in. So if we then take that analogy into the sunny trees and stormy trees, what have we got there? How do we see that in relation to breathing?
It's for calm.
No?
Well, normally our breathing has a rhythm or a pattern, and which you can relate to also the breathing in and out of the earth, you know, one cosmic breath and sleep and breathing out. And so, but there are times when our breathing gets out of that rhythm, and when, you know, either through external or internal forces. So I think it's expressing that basically.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's really, and I mean, we're really looking here in these nature works, we're looking at the cosmic, you might say the cosmic breathing, the breathing of the earth between heaven and earth, the breathing in the middle realm, but you also have that it's not just an in out, is it? There's also other qualities. And when we move, say, for instance, with, you know, you think of the rising and falling of the barometric pressure around the, you know, in the air, in the, what do you call it? It's not the air, but you know, in the middle, that realm between heaven and earth, then you have these changes are being expressed. And so when we move from the sunny, it's going to the stormy. Of course, it's a really obvious, if I just bring up the sketch, Everyone see the trees in stormy air?
Yep.
Yep.
So it's basically the same sketch, isn't it? Except all the trees are lying over at an angle, and we see there's much more dynamic quality in the air. So, as Jessie suggested, we have this sense of we've moved from a kind of a stillness with the trees in sunny air to a polarity again, and then bearing in mind that we always need to think of these as moving between one and the other. When we go back to the trees in sunny air, we come back into a stillness. So it's a bit like the moving between activity and receptivity, isn't it? It's we've got both qualities that we're looking at.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, let's have a look at Padlet. So we have lots of trees,
Mhm.
of all kinds of trees. Some very, very delicate still trees. Svetlanas and here. Yep.
Mm.
Very delicate breathing there. Very gentle.
Mm.
But well-rooted trees. And we have over here, Fiona's also very delicate, but a little bit more, quite a strong, pale gesture, because it might be deeper in real life, in the air around. And there is a gentle sunniness to it, a little bit of yellow that she's brought here and there. Then, of course, we have others, like Kate's.
Mm.
Again, quite a nice bright sunny air.
Mm.
And I noticed Kate, not sure if Kate's with us or not. Oh, Kate, you are there. Okay. I know, Kate, you commented about Viridian taking over. And yes, this is one of the things that can be easy with certain colours, particularly Viridian or Prussian blue, are colours which will easily take over and easily dominate. And as soon as one sees that happening, the best thing to do is, in fact, what I think you've done there, Kate, is you start to bring in some yellow. Or what I did on mine is I then I started creating put a lot of other colours in there, yeah? I started to do a lot of mixing in there. And really, this is one thing to think about for the trees in stormy air. You really want those trees to be well rooted, yep? So don't be afraid to bring more red down into the earth and more green up into the trunk. Then, of course, we have ones where people have done different trees, different kinds of trees, which I love, all the different,
Beautiful.
like a nice variety of trees, as Ruth has got. And Anne, who I think is running late today, has done a second one when she's gone into doing a gum tree, a eucalypt, which is actually leading us, a bit like mine, into our next motif, sunlit tree by waterfall. But here we have the sunlit tree. Yeah, so I think everybody can. We've got a couple that could possibly already. I'd be interested to see Diane and Shirley, how your stormy trees by comparison are, because Diane, yours has already got that feeling of building up, atmospheric pressure building up behind. You know, it's sunny and there's still, but they could already be something about a change that's been heralded. And also in yours, Shirley, your second one, this screaming, Shirley's already heralding that sense of the storm coming in, although the trees are looking very quiet and calm. So has anybody got any particular comments or anything they'd like to share about their experience of painting the sunny trees? Was it a difficult one? Was it easy? I know that somebody said that, oh, Anne, a simple idea but difficult to bring into fruition.
Yeah.
What did other people find?
Yeah, I think there's a tendency to worry about the tree, which has its own life, and the sunny air. Yeah, sorry, Ruth. And the sunny air. So trying to combine the sunny air and what I want to do with the sunny air and the tree. Yes, exactly. I agree with that comment. That looks easy. I mean, painting a tree can be simple, but not when you want that, what I thought we were needing to come up with.
And getting a balance with the air and the sun and the light and around them. Yeah, that was a challenge.
I think I found once I started to bring in a little bit of red, and I probably could have done a lot more red, it started to feel much better. So all that viridian was making me feel a bit sick.
Yeah.
It is a hard colour to work. I mean, I kind of love it if it's right, but it is a hard colour.
To be honest, I think you could probably cut your painting off at about there.
Right.
Because, when we look at the actual sketch, it's quite
narrow.
The height isn't it's not it's more quite an elongated sketch. So you could really, if you were to remove, which is what I did with mine, I removed a couple of centimetres at the bottom, actually. Probably about 3 centimetres of a standard piece size of watercolour paper. And then you would find, of course, that your balance would be better.
Yeah. Good idea.
Fiona, can I just ask a question then? Just stop me then. One of the things that one needs to think about really was the difference between sunny air and a sunny tree. Whereas I think you've done both. You pushed light that is legitimate tree light, if you like, sounds a bit funny, as well as air light. And that was in conventional painting, if we're doing this, you'd whack on yellow and that'd be the sunlight in your tree. Yeah. But to avoid this, because it was sunny air, that became quite something to think about. Yeah. Yeah. Well, of course, I'm going to read a little bit from an excerpt from a lecture on this very topic about painting nature. So I'm afraid it's already in my blood to do this automatically now. So that's why working out of that sense of what felt, where should the yellow go? For me, I couldn't get a sense. The sunny air is really very much, and of course I've taken mine a lot further, but that sense of the sunny air is streaming around. And it can't help, to my mind, but have an effect on the trees. It does, yeah.
So Fiona, would you suggest, sorry, it's Gail here.
Yeah, Gail.
On board it live. There was something you said about the formative forces, looking behind the veil of this world to see the formative forces, make the formative forces visible.
Yeah.
And I just thought of that when I saw all those yellow, I don't know what those formative forces of light would look like traveling around your trees, but it is just another worldliness that you've you developed there, I thought.
Yeah, but if you've seen my paintings from the 9 training sketches, and in fact quite a lot of my work that's already on my website, you'll see that that's a particular influence of mine that comes out of my work on water and air, qualitative, the formative forces in air and water, which it's just sort of become almost my trademark now. And for me not to have it in a painting about nature feels a bit sort of strange. So yeah. Anybody else got anything they'd like to share? Because then I've got a question to ask some of you.
I just wanted to ask something. This is Shirley.
Yeah.
Your painting, that yellow, I try to replicate that. I can't do that. I'm just wondering, so did you, from the very beginning, you were leaving spaces for this yellow because it kind of intermingles with the trees? So I'm just, technically, how do you create that?
Tries to think back 4 weeks. I think this is part of the thing that, I mean, I've got the live thing, of course, the real thing behind me, and there's in fact what the photo doesn't show is there's probably more mixing there in those colours. So the blue actually there's, the blue and yellow mix in places. There's quite a lot of green in the yellow up here and in that blue behind. So there is more intermingling there than perhaps is obvious from the painting. But this comes back to my particular style of starting very, very light. Yeah. So it's not that I left, I don't think I left, I didn't leave gaps. But I do recall that through this area here, I was already bringing some yellow air through there. But again, because I start very light, then when I paint over it, and there's quite a lot of all this area here is the blue going over I've brought this blue in here over the yellow.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Is it, it's something that, when you're giving the class, we start with, in this case, we started with the green, and then we went to the blue, then we went to the yellow for the trees. And then when I continue my painting, I tend to just do that same process, go to the green, go to the blue.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just like a rotating of those colours,
Yeah, whereas I start doing a lot more overlap and mixing. But when I look at yours here, Shirley, you've got your blues and yellows running in together, and you obviously, I mean, I wouldn't have left quite such an obvious white area, probably.
Yeah,
but
it's not pure white, but
no, and I'm not criticising you for that. I probably wouldn't have done it myself, but except the only time I can recall doing that is when we were doing the moonrise and the moon set in the 9 training sketches.
Yeah,
I know I hung on to some white areas for a while there because I was a bit concerned about that. Those, those rings. Remember those rings? Yeah. But again, I think, I mean, you do mix your colours quite well, quite a lot. And that's something that I would always encourage people to do. And I mean, everybody's done that to a greater or lesser extent. Let's look at Anne. So she's brought quite, although it's very delicate, she's brought quite a lot of almost more like a conventional watercolour. She's nevertheless brought quite bits of red. Here she comes. She's just entered the waiting room. There's quite a little bit of, reds and a bluish quality here, and I can see her blues going over her yellows, streaming backwards and forwards. Yeah. Diane, I'm just talking about your painting. Only nice things. I can't hear you. You're muted. You're muted.
Yeah, apologies for lateness. Yeah.
That's all right. We're just talking about whether this intermingling of yellow and blue in the sky. Somebody was asking if I left white spaces on mine. And I was saying, no, I don't. I just actually allow more intermingling. But because I start light, it may not be obvious in the photos. So, and then we're just looking at a couple of examples like yours where people, you know, the blue and the yellow are intermingling. So although we get a slightly, the vaguest tint, so to speak, of green in the sky, nevertheless, this does not, in fact, make the sky green, so to speak, but rather as part of the air quality. So I don't know, Anne, jumping in at this like this, if you'd like to share anything about your process.
Thanks. Yeah, I found this exercise really difficult. So you mean processing how I went about it?
Well, just how,
How
yeah. I mean, as it says, you've said that you found it. We've already discussed this a little bit. Ruth shared a little bit how, as you said, it seems like a simple exercise, and nevertheless, it's more difficult to bring, as you've said, into fruition than is necessarily obvious. So I don't know whether you want to talk a bit about that.
I think what I found more difficult was the shape of the trees and trying to still feel into the lightness and the sunniness on trees that don't feel like trees. Yeah, that's why I tried the Australian version.
Okay.
To see if I could feel that any differently. And I kind of could, but I don't know. I could feel it differently.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I have to admit that, you know, I don't know if you remember that, if you'll remember that extract from Mark Regnall that I read out. I must say, I was trying to bring something of that into mind, of the leaves of the tree being transmuted soil, a transformed earth substance. And I was actually trying to bring the sense of the trees being like herbaceous plants. So if everybody was wondering about the shape of how I created the trees, I was actually trying to almost bring this sense of them being plants that are being lifted above the earthly element towards the air, but nevertheless are like large plants. So taking that imaginative quality, where are we? Yeah, so in that, you see how I've actually created the trees with they're more like sort of little, more like plants. Of course, it is also quite stylized. I'm not quite sure why I'm doing such stylized ones at the moment. I must feel like it's probably because feel like I need some form in life. But just want to ask those of you who did a second painting, like Anne and Shirley, and I'm not sure who else, who tried it again, because and then I know others of you, like Diane, have sometimes done a second one. When you've done the first one and then you started a second one, what can you tell us about how you find that process? Having done the exercise once, what do you find second time round? Can you share anything on that?
It's really beneficial to do it. I found I did it more than 2 times. I've got a few others that, you can really change the trees, and you can, I'm left-handed, you can see it in my paintings that,
Oh yes, of course, now you say it, yes I can, yes.
So it always, it's always going, because I'm going from left to right when I paint, but just trying to you know, the trees go one way in one painting, and then, oh, maybe they're too blue and you add a bit more yellow and you keep building it up. And then the last painting that I've got up there that I was happy with is that I learned how to do it a little bit more subtle. And just from doing it, it informed me how to, you know, concentrate on how, you know, I know what the colors are going to do, and try not to add so much of one color. Or and then I sort of got some perspective in there. That just happened. And I really, particularly that you can't see it very well, but on the left side of it, there was a real mingling. Over on the left, it looks like hills in the background.
Oh yes, yep.
So, but just I go back and read what you send, and you know, somewhere it says something about the trees inform the birds.
Yes, that was in the Regner.
I thought that was fascinating, and how would I bring that idea into it? So sometimes it was with the brushstroke, and I can see it in your painting that there's almost this just this movement as if a bird was flying around the trees.
Right. Yeah.
Which I'll try to capture if I could.
Yes. So in our trees in stormy air, I'm not quite sure where the birds will be flying sideways, I think. But we'll see what happens there. Anybody else about doing it a second time?
I can't get out of my own way, I'm afraid. My brush strokes seem the same. I kind of get stuck in my approach, even the second and third time.
Yeah, and for me, I find it more liberating, actually. I feel like I've got the school sketch, my homework out of the way, and then I can move on to have a bit of a play and, you know, do the rest of it. So I do enjoy the others that come up, the subsequent work.
It is a little bit like that, isn't it? I've now done my homework, I've done the right thing, and now I can play a little bit, which is what you've done anyway, Anne, with yours. I think you've gone and done something.
Fiona, it just struck me while I was trying to sort of get away from trees, partly because I'm surrounded by them, and it goes back to the lovely painting of the eucalypt tree. If I look outside to the forest, the quality of air and the way it moves around Australian trees is very different from the sketch, which are round things on. You know, that's what did it. You know, I'm thinking, well, they're round things. You know, they're not our trees. When the trees up here move, it's a really different quality. For one thing, the vegetation will move, not the tree.
Yeah.
And so the whole, that's right. That's what it was. So the second one was trying to, see, can I not worry about whether they are those trees or not, and get it. But I don't know.
Sorry, I forgot that you'd done a second one. It
was for that reason, trying to sort of stop. What would happen with those kinds of trees? That's the trouble, though. I find the credibility for my tree is difficult because they're not trees that move around in the air, and so I'm illustrating from my imagination. And that, I don't think you're supposed to do that. Well,
the thing is, you know, we've met this before in the 9 training sketches.
Yeah, we have.
Here we are being given a picture of, you might say, an archetypal activity of trees. And that's what they are. They're not pictures of outer trees.
No.
It's a kind of, we're working with the formative forces, or how, you know, we're working. They're part of a series, they're part of a process. We're moving with breathing in, breathing out. In this one in particular, but the different kinds of breathing, where we've got different forces at work. But on the other hand, it's almost impossible. I found, living in the southern hemisphere, I found this with the colours. I just find that, which is why I always use that Pilbara red.
Yeah.
I find the colours of the ones so often, and I've seen this in the sketches done, in the paintings done by people in Europe, and I remember in the States as well. They really just have different greens.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is. So for me, I also feel that need to somehow express something of the forces of Australia, which are much more in the fire, earth.
But you have, that's what I was going to say, that's what is the difference is in yours, by doing it the way you did it, that they could be a whole clump of eucalypts, they could be anything, but they definitely have that quality of a eucalypt of opening up to the air.
Yeah, and yet in no way am I, well, it's nice you say that, but in no way, of course, do my trees look realistic.
No, no, they don't, not at all.
One of the least realistic looking trees probably of everybody's when you look close up.
Yeah, it's probably a good thing though. Good.
Yeah.
It's interesting that we all struggled a bit with, different.
This is this attention that the artists, when working with nature, it will be a little bit like, it's like further on, later on in 4 weeks' time when we're working with the head study.
Yeah.
The balance between working, you want to bring something, it's not necessarily realism, but something that expresses something of, in this case, the quality of what the trees, what my lived experience of trees is, as opposed to what I'm being presented with as a kind of an archetype.
Yep.
Any other thoughts before we go to our pastel sketch?
I think I'll just say one thing about, again, about the green, how I live in Brisbane, and we've had lots of rain and lots of beautiful sun as well. And everywhere is green. It's just so lush, and I'm surrounded by that colour. And I think in doing that painting, I really did get a sense of living into that, the greenness and the.
Yes, well, yours is
green.
possibly the most green. Yours is the greenest, and yet, So, yes, I think quite a lot of us are living in a very. I know I'm in an unusually green Canberra at the moment. Probably I don't know Anne in Western Australia, but certainly on the eastern seaboard, we've all got remarkably green trees at the moment.
Yeah, they're everywhere green.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to our sketch for today. As I said, it's very much the same image, it's the same scene, isn't it? We're looking at the same scene as last time, except that under very different conditions of what's happening in the forces in the air. So this one, that's another thing that we like to then we can say about this one in particular, which is a little bit different with the sunrise and sunset, and will be with the sunlit tree by waterfalls. We're really dealing in this pair, trees in storm, trees in sunny air, with the qualities of the air. So I think it looks fairly straightforward. We've got once again, our green hills. We have our same trees, but of course now they are under the influence of that stormy air. I mean, one could say that the name of the sketch is really about the stormy air. And we just go back to a sunny air. Yep. there's actually when we look here at the one of the sunny air, there's actually, you know, there's actually less differentiation in the colours. Just go back to stormy air again. There's stormy air. There's much more movement. These great rounded gestures in the sky, which are reflected in the trees, and even the earth seems to be under the influence of that. Think of that storm sweeping through. I'm looking out the window. It's actually a little bit quiet here at the moment, but when we first started, everything was just, you know, I was keeping an eye on some of my pot plants outside that they didn't get lifted up and carried off. So we've got a sense of a wind set, the wind, the air sweeping through the whole landscape. Okay, so let's move to our pastel sketch. So I'm going to change to cameras, bring out my pastels. And I'll mute everybody, so just take a minute while I set my stuff up. So I am starting with the earth, going to build up those hills again and use, look, a little pretty similar actually in the camera, but this is in fact, oh there, that's better, a lighter green and a darker green, just so I can get a little bit of that quality of dynamics into the green, to bring that sense of a wind-swept landscape. Now we turn to some red for the tree trunks, to bring in the tree trunks. And of course, the first thing to remember is that the tree trunks are going to be bending over. So mine are going to bend to the right, like being right-handed, they're going to bend to the right. But of course, if you're left-handed like Shirley, it's perfectly permissible to have them all bend to the left. Yeah? Whatever you feel comfortable with. One of the things is also to make sure right from the beginning, both with the pastel and with the paintings, to make sure, especially in this stormy air, that you've got well-rooted trees. Then we have our tree tops themselves. It's always best to just, with this one more so than the sunny air, to work out of that streaming gesture. And of course, a kind of a quick, loose, rough lemniscape, well, both which we can use in the sky, but we can also use that in the trees, which is how I've sketched the basis of my trees, my foliage.
Sorry, Fiona, Gail here.
Yeah.
That lemniscape, can you just, I didn't quite grasp how you meant I do a lemniscape with these trees bent out. How do you?
Well, what I did when I put them down is I just did that.
Oh, like that. Okay. Are we going to use any yellow? Because these are the same yellow trees that stand up nicely on an airy day.
Exactly. I haven't got to my yellow. I will be bringing in a
Okay,
little bit
just
of yellow.
wondering. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Can I just ask a basic, what's a lemniscape?
A lemniscape is a figure 8.
Right. Okay, thank you.
And as Gail said, a little bit of yellow. Because, you know, all when we look at the foliage, and I'm looking directly out the window at this moment, looking at the foliage, even though it's very dull out there and everything's waving in the wind, nevertheless, there's still quite a lot of differentiation. The back, I can see the bottom of the leaves at the moment, and they're all lighter of the tree that I'm looking at, which I think is a kind of a plain tree, than the upper side of the leaves, which I normally see.
I think the North Coast must have had the weather you've got now late yesterday afternoon.
Yeah?
Yeah, we had big hailstorms up here.
Well, we haven't had hailstorms, but fortunately.
That would be a different mood, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, I don't know if they have the giant hailstorms in Switzerland that we have in Australia and in, you know, these massive, don't know whether that would have been inside Rudolf Steiner's experience.
Or how that might relate to an emotion or a feeling. Hailstorms.
And, well, actually, there's I was only reading the other day, or the other week, in fact, I was reading about this kind of the qualities of what's happening in the earth disturbance when we get these violent either wind and hail and tremendous rains and storms from above, or whether we're getting these great floods and earthquakes from below, the sort of the different kinds of forces at work there. But I'm going to bring in Diane, here is my lemniscape sky, showing that streaming, loads of quick, loose figure 8s. Which will immediately give us a sense of tremendous movement in the air. Don't be afraid to bring it in and around the trees and streaming across a little bit, because the trees are not separate from the streaming from the storm, are they? The stormy air. They pass, as a couple of you said, they are part of the environment, and it streams through us. And of course, we also have some of that, so in the sketch, some of that deep blue in the earth. So we have then a sketch of great movement. The last thing I'm doing to complete my sketch is I'm bringing great streaming yellow lemniscate across the trees themselves. Of course, like this as has in the sketch, you could in fact build up some deeper areas. Trees in stormy air. Looking suitably, it's almost like my trees are blown away. I might add a little bit more green in there.
I can see why it's good to do pastel first. I find it quite freeing.
Yes.
You know, it's just like, yeah, it really frees me up.
Yeah, and you can really, one of the things that we can do with the pastel, as Gail says, is that but you can also, it's freeing, but it also, you can really work on the kinds of the gesture that it's very immediate, isn't it? You can immediately live into the movement and the quality of movement. Whereas as soon as we turn, and you can do that in wet or wet painting, the trick is how do you keep that quality, that sense of dynamic liveliness once you move into the wet on dry painting? And I know some of you, of course, have no problem with that. You know, there's a very strong dynamic movement in there. But in others, it's like, how do you bring that? So this would be a good exercise if you feel that sometimes your painting gets a bit static, to how we're going to work, how to work with that. And one of the things I'm going to read to you about, which is about this quality of how to paint in nature, I hope will help you with that when we get when I read that shortly. So just to remind people that, or not to remind you, but just looking, if one ever looks at the way the forces of air moves, you do actually see these great dynamic kinds of movements like that in the way you see air moves in these great kind of spiraling forms. So that's why that sense of working with something that has that quality in it, or that lemniscated quality, will help really bring that sense of movement.
Well, we see that in the whirly-whirlies, don't we? Very well.
That's right. So I'm going to start with Viridian Green with my painting and bring in the hills, just as we did last time. So one thing to think about when you start with the dry painting, when you're bringing in the start bringing the veils of colour, is that if you used, like I did in the first painting, the trees in sunny air, a very horizontal stroke and made large surfaces, you might think about this time in order to immediately bring in a more dynamic quality, working not with smaller areas of colour and with a more diagonal. But at this point on with the earth, the hills, it could still be fairly horizontal, but I'm going to bring a little bit of blue in already into that, so not just completely green hills to start. Now, in contrast to the pastel sketch, I'm going to now go to the sky because I want my green hills to set a little bit before I plant my trees on them. So I'm not going to start off by painting big lemniscates in the sky. I'm just going to paint smaller areas at this point in a more diagonal veils.
Fiona, can I ask what blue you're using?
Oh yes, I'm actually using ultramarine at this point. In my trees in sunny air, I used both ultramarine and I used what was it? And I used Art Spectrum Tarlo Blue for a bit of variety. I tended to use, I was mixing them a bit.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
I'm starting with the cobalt at this point. And one of the things is coming back to that question of what's in the sketch or what I see out the window is one of the questions I always have is the sky that we get in the colour that I should say, the blue that we get in Australian skies doesn't tend to be this cobalt ultramarine soft quality. I've seen that in England. But the Australian blue is a little bit cooler and generally though, I mean a bit harder on a bright, that bright blue sky. But at some point we can, later in this painting, bring in indigo to help with that stormy quality. In fact, I would say you would definitely need to bring in some indigo.
Fiona, could you repeat the colours you'd say for Europe for the sky, please?
I'm using ultramarine at the moment, but I'm also going to bring in a bit of Tarlo blue, which is like a gentler form of Prussian blue. So if you're going to use Prussian, use it very, very light. Or you might, those are the two colours. And then later in the painting, towards, the end of the painting, in about a week or so's time, I'll bring in some indigo. So by working with these more diagonal brush strokes, of course, in the sky, you're already laying down the gestures for the trees streaming in the wind. Now I'm going to bring in my red tree trunks, or in my case, I'm using, as usual, I'm using Pilbara red, but of course, as I've said in the past, if you don't have Pilbara red, you could use a cadmium red. And if you are using the Stockmar range, Yes, I'd probably mix a bit of carmine and vermilion together.
I think I just got my little bit of ugly.
Oh, good.
Too much brown on old Pilbara red on my brush, and it just went, whoa.
Now, while mine is drying a little bit, I thought about putting it outside on the veranda where it'll probably dry very quickly, but it may pick up some very natural effects of dirt and dust. So what I'm going to do though, I'm just going to read you a little bit from a lecture called The Phenomenon of Colour in Material Nature. And you can find it on Rudolf Steiner archive. I'll put the excerpt, as usual, I'll put it up on Padlet, but you can also read the whole lecture yourself. So I'm starting well into the lecture where it talks about the plant in relation to its cosmic quality, and he's very much talking here about luster and image colours. If we remember that our green, the green of nature, is in fact an image colour, a shadow colour. In green, we experience the lifeless image of the living. That is to say, the living forces are behind the green. It's giving a little bit of historical background. Landscape painting arises really at that time in which materialism and intellectualism grip mankind, in which an abstract nature acquires more and more power over human civilization and culture. So he's talking about when landscape painting becomes a dominant theme in the 17th and 18th century. You may say that landscape painting is in fact a product of the last 3 or 4 centuries. If you take this into consideration, you will have to say to yourself, only in the last 3 or 4 centuries has the human being reached a state of soul which enables him to comprehend the element necessary for painting nature in landscape. Why? If you look at pictures in old times, we shall conclude that all the pictures have quite a definite character. If we differentiate in colour between the image character and the luster colour and the luster nature, we will find that the old artists did not make this distinction in their painting. The old painters do not always take into consideration, for instance, that yellow demands a shadowy edge. Of course, what he means here is not that it's a shadow colour, but rather that it fades away. You know, yellow shines outwardly, and at the edge, it fades away. It's the deepest part of the yellow is always in the centre, so that it can shine outwardly. Anyway, to continue, as he says, they take it into consideration when they carry their painting more into the spiritual, but not when they painted the everyday world. Nor did they pay attention to what we demand of blue. You can see this in certain pictures by Leonardo and in others, for example, by Titian. But in general, we could say that the old painters do not make this distinction between image and lustre in the nature of colours. Why? Well, they stand in a different relationship to the world of colours. They grasp what is lustre in the colour nature. They grasp what is image, and they give it in painting an image character. But if you give image character to what in the world of colours is lustre, then you turn everything in the nature of colours into image. And then you cannot paint the landscape of plants. So you need to go and look up the lecture yourself to ponder all that in a bit more depth. And anyway, he then goes on to say, well, why not? If you do this, why can you not paint a landscape of plants? Now, suppose you want to paint a landscape of plant life, and to give the real impression of life, you have to paint the plants themselves, as well as in their green, rather darker than they really are. You must make a green surface, but make it darker than it is. So you must also make the red or yellow plant life darker in reality. But then after you've got your colour in this way in its image nature, rather darker than it really is, then you must cover the whole with an atmosphere. And this atmosphere must be, in a certain way, a yellowish white. You must get the whole in a yellowish white light. And only then will you get in the right manner what a plant really is. So you have to paint a glow over the image, and therefore you will cross over from the image nature of the green into the lustre nature of color of the yellow of color. So really, just to we'll see this in the next image, Sunlit Tree by Waterfall, in which some of you already had that experience already in these trees, is that you can see what I have done in my painting then, is that I've painted the green darker, and then I bring lots of yellow over the top. It streams over and around to bring this yellow-white atmosphere. So you paint the green darker, and then you bring these streams of light yellow right over and around it in order to not only bring this atmospheric quality, not only to bring it into lustre, but you'll immediately find it will bring a certain life or a liveliness, such as that overcomes, especially if you use that Viridian green, which is a real image green, which is why it can be, one can like it, but it can get too much when you have a lot of it. But it will really, the yellow over the top, streaming around it, will immediately lift it into quite a different quality to the green. And he goes on the lecture to say, and I would ask you to look from this point of view at the whole effort of modern landscape painting, to look how it has tried to get more and more at the secret of painting vegetation. But if you paint it as it is out there, then you just don't get there. So if you try to paint realistically, you just can't get to the secret of painting vegetation, he says. The picture does not create the impression of life. It does this only if you paint trees and plants darker in their colour than they are, and then pour over them the glow, something yellowish white that is luminous. And this will light up, bring a lit up atmosphere. And then you succeed really in painting on the canvas or on any other surface something that gives you the impression of life. And it's this matter of sensibility, and this sensibility leads you to paint in something that floods it as an expression of the shining cosmos, of that which descends out of the universe onto the earth as luster. In no other way can you get behind the secret of plant life, that is to say, of nature clothed in vegetation. I think that's a lovely image, thinking of the trees as being nature, the forces of nature, but clothed in vegetation, clothed in the green, which the shining forces of the cosmos bring this yellow-white atmosphere, illumination to it. And he goes on to say, if you obey this law, you will also realise that everything painting seeks to achieve must also be sought in the nature of colours itself. What, in fact, is the media of painting? You have the surface, canvas or paper or whatnot, and on the surface you have to fix a pictorial form what is there. But if something refuses to be fixed in pictorial form, such as plant nature, then you must at least pour over it the lustre character. So it's quite a long lecture. I will send you the link when I send you the video, unless you want to write it down now, which is, it's GA291. Interestingly enough, I've just noticed at the beginning of that lecture, they've put the calendar of the soul, 2 verses from the calendar of the soul, one the northern hemisphere and one the southern hemisphere. So you see then, also this is something that particularly that if you're a class teacher or you're an art teacher in a Steiner school, that when working with these trees, with this sunny air and stormy air, you're not only working with this kind of a breathing or different kinds of a breathing of the way the air works, particularly in the element of air, the calm, the tremendous activity and the tremendous quietness, and then the tremendous activity, but you're also working with this sense of bringing this the ensouling nature of the lustre colour of yellow streams over and around the trees, and that will help give that quality of life, will lift the greenness, that quality of greenness. If you just paint green trees, green plants with green out of a tube, then it will have that sense of being a bit dead and fixed. So for that reason, you can see in my painting of the sunny air, I was already into, I've already kind of been trained into that principle of bringing the yellow, the lightish yellow. And I don't necessarily use a lemon yellow. I think I use cadmium, actually. I always have a slight preference for the cadmium, a mid yellow. So that's something, of course, you can work on. You can experiment with yourself in your painting over the next 2 weeks. So in the last 15 minutes, I'm just going to now return to my painting, and I'm going to bring in the actual trees themselves. What I mean, of course, by the actual trees themselves is I mean the foliage of the trees. So I'm going to do this with my Viridian green, not too dark. And I'm going to follow the gestures of the blue streaming sky that I've already laid down.
Fiona, a question. With the green, the Viridian green, you said to start with a very light layer. do you then continue with light layers, or do you go into a darker Viridian green, you know, a darker solution to have more of an impact, or do you just keep building it with light layers?
Yeah, with Viridian, I don't tend to make it much darker. I find a few layers of a light Viridian will already make it quite dark. I would then be switching to creating a green out of, say, my phthalo blue and a yellow yeah.
On top of the few layers you put on first.
Yeah, where I would switch in the middle stages of the painting. I would start using
yellow, blue and lemon yellow.
Yeah, some different green. And then, of course, bearing in mind that I'm then going to bring the sweeping yellow over the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to be careful with the Viridian, as Kate noted on Padlet, that of its tendency to take over. It's got quite a mineral quality to it. So one does have to be aware of that. Although it's a beautiful green, it will give you dark. It's fine for sort of cypress color for cypress trees, but if you're looking for something of for this exercise, I'd just be a bit careful with it. I'm just strengthening my sky and hills, earth a little bit. Okay, so everyone, it's 4 o'clock, or I think for those of us on the eastern seaboard, 4 hours earlier. Anyway, lunchtime probably. So here we are. I think you can see, even though mine's quite wet and the paper, of course, is buckled, you can see that already I've got the whole basis of the painting. In fact, mine are all streaming so much that, in fact, my 7th tree is streaming. They're all being blown off the paper, so I'm going to have to work with that, of how to balance that in the fortnight. I would actually hope, I expect, or I would hope anyway, that you will find this one quite fun to do. Yeah? Shrugs, smiles. We'll find out, they say. Yes. Okay, then. All right. Well, I think then, of course, it being 4, what we'll do is we'll say goodbye and good painting. I will put up, as I said, I'll send you the link with the video to that lecture if you want to read more about it. And happy painting. And of course, next time we'll be going further with our trees, with the 4 elements, sunlit tree by a waterfall, where we have all 4 elements coming into play together. And as I've said many times, it's probably my favourite motif.
Fabulous.
Okay.
Thanks, Fiona.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Fiona. Bye, everybody.
Bye.